would you have sought, how do you think the United States should seek to gain information from a mastermind like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed if he refuses to answer questions voluntarily, when additional American lives could be on the line with information that he's refusing to provide?
I come from a country which spent 15 years involved in facing terrorism on the streets. I mean, I grew up in a country where my mother wouldn't let me go shopping on Oxford Street because bombs were going off at times on a weekly basis. And that experience has had a very profound effect on how the United Kingdom addresses precisely the question that you have addressed. And the thinking in the British military and the thinking across the board politically, it's really not a left-right issue. It's a broad consensus in the United Kingdom, is that coercion doesn't work. That the experience of the United Kingdom, which moved in the early 1970s to use techniques that were very similar to those that were used on detainee 063, hooding, stress positions, humiliation, and so on and so forth, didn't work. The view is taken in the United Kingdom that it extended the conflict with the IRA probably by between 15 and 20 years. Because what it did was that it outraged the community that was associated with those who were subject to these particular techniques. And it created a breeding ground, a recruiting ground, which made it impossible for the British government, if you like, to persuade those who were associated with the IRA but had not crossed the line into use of violence to think another way. And so in answering your question, I'm profoundly influenced by that experience. And one of the great regrets that I have is that the administration never seemed to turn for advice to its closest allies and ask them, what was your experience when you faced a similar situation? And the answer they would have got from whatever government it was, Conservative, Labour, is don't go down the route, one, of using coercion, and two, don't call it a war on terror. Why? Because by calling it a war on terror, you transform criminals into warriors, and you create a context in which they are able to recruit in their struggle. And if you notice, neither Prime Minister Blair nor Prime Minister Brown, nor indeed the Conservative leader of the opposition ever uses the phrase war on terror because of the experience with the IRA. Now, in relation specifically to your question, there are hard cases. I did smile because, frankly, the image that weeks and weeks of rapport building with KSM is somehow going to produce results is counterintuitive. But the reality is we don't know. And I spoke in my investigation to a lot of interrogators, military, FBI, who basically said coercion doesn't work. You get information that they want to give you that they think is going to stop the pain from happening. And I listened just yesterday to a remarkable tape that I recommend to all the members of the committee to listen to of Senator McCain, a man who has first-hand experience of this situation, a brave man, describing in a 1997 interview with Dan Rather how he broke and owned up and signed a confession to having personally targeted men and women, children, in North Vietnam because he was facing such conditions that he could no longer cope. And that, I think, is the reality. I've firmly come to the view that coercion doesn't work, and it has such a negative backlash in terms of the consequences that the better price to pay is not to go down that route at all.